Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Research Podcast. Today we're about to embark on a truly intense and really surprising deep dive. We're taking on a geopolitical situation that feels, well, familiar to many of us, but also deeply entrenched, the ongoing tension between Israel and Iran. It often feels like we've heard every possible scenario about this conflict, the usual players, the anticipated moves, the red lines. But our sources for this deep dive, and we've got a fascinating stack of information, including recent YouTube analysis, comprehensive reports in the Wall Street Journal, Euronews, and the Financial Times, they reveal a completely unexpected twist. It's really going to challenge what you think you know about this whole unfolding situation.
Absolutely. And our mission today is basically to unpack these sources, find those hidden nuggets of insight, and show you why this situation is far more complex, multi-layered, and frankly, more dangerous than it might appear on the surface. We're not just scratching the surface here. We're really going to dig into the layers that make this so unpredictable.
Exactly. We're going beyond the headlines, diving into some surprising geopolitical maneuvers, military strategies, and even the psychological game of information control during wartime. We're going to explore how seemingly isolated incidents actually weave into a much larger, more volatile tapestry. Okay, so let's start where most people would. The most obvious third party poised to jump into the Israel-Iran conflict. For a long time, that's unquestionably been the United States. What do our sources say about America's expected role here?
Well, you're right. The general assumption has always been that America would primarily act in pretty unwavering support of Israel. The analyses we've looked at, they outline pretty clear-cut scenarios for their direct involvement, almost like a textbook response to certain triggers, if you will. It's about established red lines that, once crossed, would compel an immediate and, well, decisive U.S. military response.
And what are those main triggers specifically? What are the events that our sources identify as the red lines that would unequivocally bring the U.S. directly into the fray?
Right. Our sources highlight a couple of very specific and very direct possibilities. One involves a direct missile strike from Iran that results in the death of an Israeli citizen who also holds a U.S. passport. This immediately elevates the incident, you see, from a regional conflict to one that directly implicates American lives, triggering a rapid escalation and, according to these analyses, direct U.S. military action. The other critical trigger is a direct hit on a U.S. diplomatic asset. So imagine a missile, kind of like the ones that have recently landed near American embassies or consulates, actually impacting the building itself, or maybe a military base. Either of those scenarios would bypass any diplomatic ambiguities and, the sources suggest, lead to immediate and decisive U.S. moves. It's fascinating, isn't it, how precisely those lines are drawn, almost as if to eliminate any doubt about what constitutes an undeniable act of war against American interests.
Okay, and this brings us to a development that truly shifts the regional chessboard in a way nobody expected. Because suddenly, a third, utterly unexpected country has entered the arena, making a remarkably bold move. And that's Qatar.
Absolutely surprising, yeah. And this isn't just speculation. The sources describe a very recent and specific incident involving 3 Qatari Emiri Air Force jets. These aren't just generic aircraft. They are specifically identified by designations or call signs: TIMS-01, TIMS-02, and TIM-03. Now, while the exact meaning or significance of TIM isn't publicly detailed in our sources, the mere fact that these specific designations are known and reported, well, it lends undeniable weight and credibility to this account. It suggests a very precise and verified report of their movements.
3 jets, and with such specific identifiers, that's a profound detail. So where exactly did these Qatari jets go, and what was the nature of their flight? This wasn't just a casual flyby, was it?
No, not at all. The sources detail their flight path with astonishing clarity, laying out a highly coordinated and deliberate operation. They first crossed the Arabian Gulf, which is a significant feat of air navigation and military readiness in itself. Then, crucially, they penetrated deep into Iranian airspace. Once inside, they conducted what really amounts to a reconnaissance mission. The objective, as our source suggests, was specifically to scout for any Iranian missile installations that could potentially threaten the Gulf region. Think about that for a moment. A smaller, typically more diplomatically inclined Gulf state directly poking into Iranian skies, doing what you would normally expect a major global military power to undertake. It's an incredibly bold and, frankly, provocative maneuver for a nation like Qatar, which, often plays a mediating role in regional disputes.
Wow. So they actually went into Iranian airspace deeply enough to conduct reconnaissance. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And how did they return? Did they just turn around and retrace their path?
Intriguingly, no, they did not. They returned over Saudi airspace, which is another profoundly significant detail. It strongly suggests either incredibly careful pre-planning to avoid further direct confrontation or unnecessary exposure over the Gulf, or perhaps even a coordinated understanding, if not outright cooperation with Saudi Arabia for their return route. This wasn't a spontaneous or haphazard action. It implies a deeper strategic calculus at play, potentially indicating a broader shift in regional alliances or at least a temporary alignment of interests.
So what does this all mean? What's the profound significance of Qatar, of all countries, making such a bold move into Iranian airspace? Feels like something much bigger than just a simple reconnaissance flight, hinting at a profound shift.
Yeah, this raises a crucial question. If these reports hold true, and these Qatari jets operated with such impunity in Iranian skies that Iran would normally defend vigorously, almost fanatically, right? Given their national pride and deeply ingrained security doctrines, it points to a profound and severe weakness within the Iranian regime's defensive capabilities. It's not just a breach, it's an unresponded-to incursion into their sovereign territory. The sources really lean into this interpretation, suggesting it's an unprecedented vulnerability, almost signaling a precursor to the regime's potential collapse, or at least a significant decline in its ability to defend itself. It's like a canary in the coal mine for Iranian air defense capabilities, or frankly, the current lack thereof. This action, if accurately reported, fundamentally alters the perceived power dynamics in the region and suggests that Iran's long-cultivated image of impenetrable defense might be, well, cracking.
Okay, so we've established this surprising and audacious Qatari action, but it ties into a broader narrative that's gaining significant traction, particularly from Israeli and Western perspectives. The idea that the Iranian regime is on the verge of collapse. What concrete evidence do our sources provide for this potentially seismic shift?
Right. One of our key sources, the Wall Street Journal, published an article that directly supports this narrative of Iranian vulnerability and potentially desperation. It suggests Iran has actually been reaching out through multiple mediators, discreetly indicating a strong desire to end the conflict. What's particularly fascinating here, and the source points this out, is that the Wall Street Journal is considered by some to be Israeli-funded, yet its reports are widely cited by news agencies across the spectrum for their accuracy and reliability. This gives the report a unique credibility, suggesting that even a publication with perhaps a certain perspective is reporting information that indicates genuine Iranian distress and a willingness to de-escalate. It's not just propaganda, it's being taken seriously across the board because of its consistent track record of accurate reporting.
That's a critical detail, isn't it? The source of information always matters. And if a publication with that kind of reputation and perceived funding reports it, it carries significant weight. But beyond just reaching out for mediation, are there more tangible, undeniable military actions that underline this narrative of Iranian vulnerability?
Absolutely. You can't ignore the direct military actions, which are incredibly provocative and designed for maximum public impact. The sources detail a specific and incredibly brazen attack. The Iranian TV and radio headquarters were hit live on air. This wasn't a clandestine strike. It was engineered to be seen, to send a message not just to the regime, but to the Iranian populace and the world.
On air. That's almost unbelievable. I mean, that's wild. That's not just an attack on a physical building. It's an attack on their very ability to communicate with their own people, to control their narrative. What does that signify?
Precisely. The reporting describes how anchor Sahar Mami was on air, broadcasting as the attack began, and then later, reporter Yunus Shadlu was seen reporting live from the burning building itself amidst the chaos. This wasn't a random strike against infrastructure. Hitting the state broadcaster is a direct assault on a sovereign asset, a symbol of national control and communication. It's not just an act of war, it's a direct, public, undeniable message. It's like targeting the very voice of the nation, deliberately disrupting their narrative and humiliating them in real time on a global stage.
So what does striking a target like that, especially live on air, strategically signify for Israel? What's the profound message they're trying to send by hitting such a prominent symbolic target in the heart of Tehran?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a powerful and audacious signal from Israel that they believe they have near total air superiority over Tehran. It implies they can strike at will, even at the heart of the capital, with seemingly little to no effective resistance. This kind of brazen attack is meant to convey to the Iranian populace and to the world that the regime's defenses are crumbling, suggesting an impending collapse or at least a severe weakening of the Iranian government's ability to protect its own territory and its own people. It's a very public humiliation, fundamentally aimed at undermining confidence in the regime and potentially sparking internal dissent. It's a psychological operation as much as a military one.
But on the flip side, we're hearing a completely different story from Iran, right? Despite these significant strikes and public humiliations, they're not exactly waving a white flag or admitting defeat.
No, not at all. Despite these significant strikes and the clear implications of those Qatari flights, Iranian officials are pushing back hard against any narrative of surrender or weakness. Our sources quote Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi, who has publicly stated that Iran will absolutely retaliate and that these attacks will not go unanswered. This is a clear message of defiance, designed to project an image of unwavering resolve to both their domestic audience and international adversaries.
And the military leadership, what are they saying? Are they echoing the sentiment, or are they perhaps more cautious given the apparent vulnerabilities?
The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC commander, has issued even more chilling warnings, going further than mere political rhetoric. He explicitly stated that the gates of hell will open on Israelis, threatening devastating consequences and an expansion of attacks that would, shock the region. They are essentially saying, we're not done, we have more capabilities in reserve, and we are prepared to use them. This rhetoric is designed to project an unyielding strength and an iron will to fight, directly challenging the Israeli narrative of impending collapse and seeking to reestablish their deterrence.
So they're still claiming to possess a target bank within Israel, essentially a pre-identified list of strategic locations they haven't hit yet, but could at any moment.
Precisely, yeah. This implies they are holding back on certain targets, indicating that their capacity for strikes remains high and that these aren't their final or most potent moves. The messaging from Iran is that they can and will continue to strike, targeting key strategic locations like Ben Gurion Airport and the Dimona nuclear reactor, as some Iranian officials have even hinted at publicly. It's a dangerous game of signaling and counter-signaling, where each side tries to project an image of overwhelming strength while simultaneously attempting to expose the other's deepest weaknesses. The battle isn't just military, it's deeply rooted in the psychological and informational realms, a fight for perception as much as for territory.
It's truly fascinating how much of modern conflict now plays out in the media and online, not just on the physical battlefield. Our sources highlight Israel's strategic and very deliberate approach to information control. This seems to be a significant component of their overall wartime strategy.
Absolutely. A Euronews analysis mentioned in our source material reveals that the Israeli Ministry of Information exercises significant and active control over the media's reporting of casualties. They are actively trying to shape the public perception of the war's impact on their side, suggesting that any losses are minimal, contained, or, simply not happening. This is a powerful tool in controlling the narrative, especially for domestic consumption and for projecting an image of invulnerability to the international community.
So they're intentionally not showing the full picture of their losses in places like Tel Aviv, even if there are severe impacts from Iranian strikes. Is this something the public is aware of?
Correct. The analysis suggests that Israel has a very specific and robust apparatus for suppressing information. And this control isn't limited to traditional media outlets. It even extends to actively controlling what the source described as Zionist YouTubers and other social media influencers. Essentially, any public figures or content creators perceived as supportive of Israel who might inadvertently or intentionally share unapproved information. People who post real, that is, unapproved videos showing actual damage or casualties can even face arrest. This raises incredibly important questions about media freedom and the flow of information during wartime, doesn't it? And it's a powerful tool in their strategy to project unwavering national strength and to maintain a sense of calm and control among their population. It's a deliberate, top-down effort to manage perception and prevent any panic, dissent, or the psychological toll of visible losses.
But despite this extensive suppression and control, it sounds like the Iranian message, or at least images of the damage they inflict, is still finding ways to get through, even if it's through unofficial channels. How does that counter this Israeli information strategy?
Right. The Iranian response, even if it's through unofficial channels or leaked videos that circulate outside mainstream media, aims directly to show that despite Israel's tight media control, Iran can inflict damage and has the capability to strike deep into Israeli territory. This serves as a critical counter-narrative to Israel's attempts to convey that minimal harm has been done. It's a battle for hearts and minds, both domestically within Iran and Israel, and internationally. The very act of circulating these unapproved videos becomes a strategic move in itself, trying to undermine the official Israeli narrative and demonstrate continued Iranian capability and resolve, even if it's an uphill battle against a sophisticated information machine.
Okay, circling back to the air war, it sounds like the opening of Iranian airspace to enemy aircraft, which we touched on earlier, is a huge deal, almost a game changer in the broader conflict. Let's dive deeper into what that truly signifies.
It's a critical indicator of profound weakness. Yeah.
The source specifically points out that Israeli F-16 and F-15 fighter jets, which previously hadn't been actively involved in direct attacks against Iran, are now flying apparently unhindered in Iranian skies. This is a dramatic escalation and a clear sign that Iran's air defenses are either being systematically bypassed, effectively neutralized, or are simply ineffective against these incursions. It implies a significant and alarming shift in air superiority unequivocally in Israel's favor, suggesting a degree of aerial freedom they haven't had before.
And the Qatari flights we mentioned earlier, do they truly play into this narrative of open Iranian skies, or are they a separate, isolated issue? How do they fit? They absolutely reinforce it. Those Qatari reconnaissance flights we discussed earlier further underscore the extreme vulnerability of Iranian airspace. If a smaller regional power like Qatar can penetrate their defenses and conduct such a mission without apparent interception or significant challenge, it sends a very strong and public message about Iran's compromised air defense capabilities. It validates the idea that Iranian skies are no longer secure, contributing significantly to the broader narrative of the regime's military weakness and potentially inviting other regional actors to test those boundaries.
Though it's worth noting, the sources also mention some Iranian counterclaims, right? They're trying to show they're not completely vulnerable, pushing back on this narrative of open skies.
Yes, there's certainly a counter-narrative circulating, albeit unverified by our primary sources. It's coming from some Iranian media outlets claiming they shot down an Israeli F-35 fighter jet over Tabriz. Now, this would indeed be a significant and highly impactful counter, if true, as the F-35 is one of the world's most advanced stealth aircraft, supposedly undetectable. However, its unverified nature really highlights the intense battle for perception ongoing alongside the actual conflict. Each side is fighting vigorously to control the information landscape. And this claim, whether ultimately proven true or not, serves the immediate purpose of trying to project continued strength and defensive capability in the face of widespread reports of vulnerability. It's a key tactic in the information war.
Okay, let's bring America back into the conversation, because our sources indicate a very concrete and massive strategic move.
Yeah.
The deployment of the USS Nimitz carrier strike group to the Middle East. That's huge, isn't it? It signals a major shift in focus and commitment.
It's enormous, yeah. An unmistakable signal. The USS Nimitz is a true Leviathan, almost certainly the largest aircraft carrier in the world, a floating city of immense military power. It carries approximately 60 aircraft, a formidable air wing in itself, capable of projecting immense force across a vast area. It's been in service since 1975, a testament to its enduring design and operational effectiveness, and crucially, it has extensive combat experience, specifically in the Arabian Gulf region. Its crew is highly trained and deeply familiar with operations there, giving it an immediate and significant operational advantage the moment it arrives.
And where was it before this? To truly understand the significance of its redeployment, was it already close to the region, or was this a major strategic pivot?
That's what makes the move so incredibly telling and underscores the urgency of the situation. It was originally stationed near Taiwan, a key strategic area for U.S. interests in the Pacific and a major point of geopolitical tension with China. Furthermore, it was scheduled for a diplomatic and operational visit to Vietnam on the 20th of this month, a routine engagement for such a vessel. But the U.S. abruptly diverted it directly to the Middle East due to the escalating Israel-Iran situation. That's a clear, public, and unambiguous strategic shift, indicating the extreme seriousness with which the U.S. views the region's instability and the potential for a wider, uncontained conflict. It's not a subtle message. It's a very loud statement of U.S. commitment to the area.
So what does this massive deployment actually mean? Is it an immediate precursor to the U.S. entering the war? Or is it more of a deterrent, a show of overwhelming force aiming to shape Iranian behavior?
Our sources suggest not necessarily an immediate entry into direct combat. The U.S., according to this analysis, will only participate directly if it becomes absolutely clear and undeniable that the Iranian regime is on the verge of collapsing. They need Israel to definitively prove that the regime is on its last legs, that its demise is imminent, irreversible, and perhaps even welcomed by a significant portion of the Iranian population. It's a remarkably high bar, indicating a profound reluctance to get drawn into a protracted, costly conflict without a clear, achievable objective that avoids another, potentially endless engagement in the Middle East.
And if they do enter, if that high bar is met, what's their stated goal? Is it regime change in Iran, explicitly toppling the government, or something more specific and perhaps more narrowly defined?
Yeah, this raises a crucial point about stated intentions versus potential outcomes. The stated U.S. objective, as described in the sources, would be very specific: to destroy Iran's nuclear program. The public announcement, should intervention occur, would be very carefully worded. They would likely claim they are not there to topple the Iranian government nor to occupy the country, but specifically to prevent its nuclear capabilities, its enriched uranium, its facilities, its scientists from falling into the wrong hands, especially if there's a power vacuum or a complete collapse of central authority. It's a very specific, limited objective, at least on the surface, designed to justify intervention to the international community and the American public without committing to a full-scale occupation or a nation-building effort.
Okay, speaking of the nuclear program, there have been claims from Israel about effectively destroying Iran's nuclear facilities, implying a kind of knockout blow. What do our sources say about the reality of that? Is it truly neutralized, or is the picture more complicated?
The Wall Street Journal, again, provides crucial and pretty sobering insight here. It states that while Israel has indeed carried out some of the most devastating attacks against Iran's nuclear facilities in decades, strikes that have undoubtedly caused significant damage and delays, these strikes were ultimately not fatal. And that's a key distinction from the more triumphalist rhetoric you might hear elsewhere.
So, not destroyed then, just damaged, implying a temporary setback rather than a definitive end to their capabilities.
No. The report clearly indicates that the program is still alive and, even more concerning, able to rise from the rubble. This implies that despite the significant damage, the loss of some scientists, and disruption to their supply chain, Iran's core nuclear capabilities remain intact and can be reconstituted relatively quickly. It's a setback, certainly, but it's not a knockout blow that permanently eliminates the threat. The infrastructure, the knowledge, and the intent remain.
And what does that mean for U.S. strategy? If Israel, even with its highly advanced military, can't completely destroy Iran's nuclear program, does that fundamentally change America's calculus regarding intervention?
It strongly suggests that the U.S. doesn't believe Israel alone can fully neutralize the Iranian nuclear threat. This unresolved nuclear program is, therefore, a key and enduring driver for potential U.S. intervention, indicating that a conventional strike, even if devastating, might not be sufficient to achieve the long-term goal of preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. It implies that a deeper, more sustained effort would be required, perhaps a ground operation or a prolonged air campaign, which Israel might not be capable of providing on its own. This leaves the nuclear threat as a lingering, extremely dangerous wildcard.
This whole situation, particularly Israel's strategic moves, it reminds me of the importance of looking at history to understand the present. Our sources include an intriguing analysis from the Financial Times comparing this current conflict to Israel's past wars to find parallels, but also crucial distinctions.
It's a fascinating and incredibly insightful framework indeed. The article looks at three specific historical precedents: the 1967 war, the 2003 strike on Iraq's nuclear reactor, and then compares them to the current war with Iran. The analysis focuses on identifying similar strategic objectives or tactics, drawing lessons from past successes and failures, and highlighting how the current situation diverges. It provides a vital historical lens through which to truly understand the present complexities and potential future trajectories.
Let's start with 1967, the Six-Day War. How does that historic conflict compare to what we're seeing now with Iran, particularly in terms of air power?
Right. In 1967, Israel launched a lightning-fast surprise attack that quickly established overwhelming air superiority over Arab states, essentially controlling the skies within a very short period, neutralizing their air forces on the ground. The comparison here is Israel's current strategy to gain air dominance over Iran, particularly over Tehran, as we've discussed, with the seemingly unhindered flights of their F-16s and F-15s. However, this is where a crucial distinction emerges, doesn't it? The situation is profoundly different now because Iran possesses a robust and highly developed missile program, unlike Egypt and other Arab states in 1967. So while Israel might achieve air superiority and freedom to operate in Iranian skies, this doesn't neutralize Iran's capacity to inflict damage via ground-launched missiles on cities like Tel Aviv. The key distinction here is the second strike capability that Iran maintains, meaning even with total air dominance, Israel still faces a significant and immediate retaliatory threat from ground-launched launched missiles, a factor that was largely absent in the strategic calculus of the Six-Day War. This makes the current conflict far more complex and dangerous for Israel, as air superiority doesn't guarantee security.
That's a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
It's clearly not a one-to-one parallel then. What about the 2003 strike on Iraq's nuclear reactor? That seems more directly relevant to the nuclear aspect of the current conflict, doesn't it?
That's also very relevant, and the analogy is quite strong in certain aspects. In 2003, Israel carried out a surgical precision strike on Iraq's French-built Tammuz nuclear reactor, which Saddam Hussein had developed and which was quite advanced for its time. The analogy here is clear. Israel's current strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, aiming to disrupt or destroy their program. But the critical difference, according to the source, is that in 2003, Israel wasn't aiming for regime change in Iraq. The objective was purely to dismantle the immediate nuclear threat posed by that specific reactor. In the current conflict, the overwhelming perception, both from Israeli statements and their actions, is that the Israeli actions are, directly or indirectly, aimed at causing the collapse of the Iranian regime. They are going beyond merely disabling the nuclear program to seeking a fundamental shift in Iran's political landscape. The stakes and ultimate goals are far higher this time.
So the current Iran war is like a third scenario that builds on these past experiences, incorporating elements of both, but also diverging significantly because of these more ambitious, broader objectives, especially the implicit goal of regime change.
Exactly. Our sources suggest that Iran previously cultivated an exaggerated image of its military capabilities, meticulously building a kind of false deterrence based on perceived rather than proven strength. This was meant to keep potential adversaries at bay and prevent direct military confrontation. Now, Israel is directly challenging this long-held perception by conducting audacious military operations deep inside Iran, including assassinations of scientists, direct strikes on nuclear facilities, and, as we've discussed, unhindered air incursions. This aims to expose the true, perhaps more limited extent of Iran's military prowess and, crucially, undermine its internal credibility, both with its own populace, who are told they live under an impenetrable shield, and with regional actors who might be considering aligning with or against Iran. It's a deliberate strategy to dismantle that false deterrence and reveal the actual vulnerabilities.
Okay, this is where the analysis gets incredibly grim and raises truly terrifying possibilities. If the Iranian regime is indeed weakening and facing existential threats, what are the potential consequences? Our sources talk about something called a desperate attack, and that sounds like the nightmare scenario.
Yes, the concept of a Baz attack. This term, which roughly translates to a desperate attack, is a deeply unsettling possibility outlined in our sources. The analysis suggests that as the Iranian regime weakens and faces more devastating blows, especially those targeting their core legitimacy and control, like the attack on state TV, it might resort to using everything in its hands as a last resort, to survive or to inflict maximum damage before falling. It's a deeply concerning possibility. A cornered regime becoming even more dangerous and unpredictable as it perceives its very survival to be at stake. The idea is that they wouldn't go down quietly. They'd unleash every last, most horrific resort they possess.
So what kind of desperate weapons are they talking about? What would everything in his hands entail in this context? Because their phrase conjures up some truly frightening images.
Well, for one, the sources mention that the U.S. has previously accused Iran of possessing biological and chemical weapons capabilities. If this is true, a weakening regime facing imminent collapse might deploy them as a last-ditch effort, caring little for international norms or the consequences. What's particularly chilling is the idea that they might not necessarily target Israel directly, but possibly neighboring countries or even international shipping lanes. The goal would be to create widespread chaos and devastation across the region, demonstrating their capacity for destruction even in their final moments, potentially in a bid to draw in other powers or simply to inflict maximum pain.
That's terrifying, thinking about the regional implications far beyond just Israel. Is there anything else that falls into this category of a desperate attack, something even more catastrophic?
Critically, our sources highlight Iran's possession of 60% enriched uranium.
60%.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, while 90% enrichment is typically needed for a highly efficient, sophisticated nuclear weapon, 60% is considered highly enriched uranium and poses an immediate proliferation risk. It's dangerously close. It allows for the rapid construction of what's often termed a dirty bomb or a primitive nuclear device, even if it's less efficient than a fully refined weapon. This material, according to American analysis cited in our sources, has been moved and hidden in secret, hard-to-reach wells, making it incredibly difficult to detect or strike effectively. The profound concern is that if the regime is truly desperate, facing total annihilation, they might use this 60% enriched uranium without further refinement.
And how would such a primitive nuclear bomb be delivered? You mentioned it wouldn't be a sophisticated missile, I assume?
Precisely. The suggestion is that it could be put on a plane, perhaps even a commercial aircraft converted for such a purpose, or a large truck, and detonated, creating a massive radioactive strike. This would signal a profound and catastrophic escalation, effectively declaring to the world, we have our weapon and we are willing to use it. This would push the conflict into an entirely new and extremely dangerous phase, shifting from conventional warfare to something with far-reaching and devastating environmental and human consequences across the region, causing a global outcry and forcing an unprecedented international response.
So given the severity of these potential desperate measures and the resilience of Iran's nuclear program, how does this end then? Can Israel or even the U.S. truly neutralize this entire threat, particularly the nuclear one, with current strategies?
Well, the expert in our source material holds a very sobering belief that Israel cannot destroy Iran's nuclear program alone. Their strikes, while devastating, are not decisive. And even if the United States were to intervene militarily, committing its substantial forces, including the Nimitz carrier group, the assessment is that it might only succeed in delaying the program for a few months, rather than completely dismantling it. This assessment is quite sobering, suggesting the deep resilience and embedded nature of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, despite significant attacks. It implies that the current approach is, at best, a temporary measure.
So what would it ultimately take, then, to truly dismantle Iran's nuclear program, if not conventional airstrikes by Israel or even the full might of the U.S. Air Force? What's the unspoken implication here?
The implication, although not explicitly stated in our sources, is that the complete definitive neutralization of Iran's nuclear program would likely require ground forces. This would entail a far more complex, costly, and dangerous endeavor than air campaigns alone, involving troops on the ground, rooting out facilities, and securing materials. This raises a crucial and uncomfortable question. Does the current strategy of targeted strikes and air superiority truly address the core long-term issue of Iran's nuclear capabilities? Or is it merely pushing the problem further down the road at an incredibly high and growing risk? It strongly suggests that a decisive solution to the nuclear issue is far from simple and carries immense geopolitical and human costs.
This all leads to the biggest, most complex question of all, the potential fall of the Iranian regime. Is it really on the cards, as some of the narratives suggest? And what would that even look like if it were to happen? Because regime change is rarely a clean, straightforward affair.
This raises an incredibly important question, precisely because a collapse wouldn't be simple or clean. Our sources indicate that such an event could lead to a highly unstable power vacuum, potentially plunging the country into a devastating civil war, which would be a humanitarian catastrophe and a major destabilizing force for the entire region. Alternatively, an unknown opposition group could seize power, but there's a huge degree of uncertainty about who or what might replace the current government or Supreme Leader Khamenei. There's no clear, recognized opposition leader or group poised to take the reins. It's a very complex and unpredictable scenario where the cure, in some ways, could prove to be as dangerous and destabilizing as the disease itself. The ripple effects across the Middle East would be immense.
So for everyone listening, what are the concrete, practical signs we should be looking for to understand if the Iranian regime is truly weakening, if its grip is loosening, or if it's on the verge of collapse? Beyond the daily headlines and official rhetoric, what are the actionable cues?
The analysis points to two key indicators that would signal a real, profound shift in Iran's capabilities and internal stability. First, a dramatic and sustained decrease in the number of missiles Iran launches against Israel each day. If that activity falls off sharply, not just for a day or two, but consistently over a period of time, it's a strong signal that their capabilities are severely degraded, they're running out of resources, or their command and control structure is breaking down. Second, and perhaps even more telling, if Iran were to suddenly and unexpectedly request negotiations, particularly if those requests suggested unconditional surrender or highly disadvantageous terms, conceding significant ground without gaining much in return, that would be a major and undeniable sign of internal distress and desperation. These are the practical cues to watch for, beyond the daily headlines and official statements, that could truly indicate a fundamental shift in the regime's power.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how the media coverage itself plays such a critical role in this perception battle, almost shaping our understanding of who's winning or losing, even influencing the psychological aspect of the conflict.
Absolutely. The analysis observes a striking asymmetry. Western media predominantly focuses on the potential collapse of Iran, meticulously detailing every vulnerability and strike against the regime. However, it very rarely discusses any significant losses or potential collapse on the Israeli side, even when sources suggest such losses exist. This asymmetry in reporting creates a skewed perception of the conflict, making it seem like a heavily one-sided affair, where Iran is constantly on the defensive and Israel is largely invulnerable.
Even though you mentioned earlier that our sources suggest Israel is actually taking horrendous losses that aren't being disclosed to the public, that information is tightly controlled. So the picture we get is deliberately incomplete.
Precisely. Our sources suggest that Israel is indeed incurring severe damage and significant losses, both human and material. But this information is tightly controlled and not released to the public, much like we discussed with their information suppression apparatus. If Israel were to genuinely be crippled by these attacks, the expectation, as we discussed earlier, is that the U.S. would immediately intervene. This asymmetry in reporting is a crucial part of the information war, shaping global perception and maintaining a narrative of Israeli strength and resilience, even if the reality on the ground is far more challenging and costly. It leaves you, the listener, wondering what's truly happening behind the scenes beyond the carefully curated headlines. So as we wrap things up on this deep dive, it's abundantly clear that this conflict is far from a simple two-sided affair. We've seen the potential for broader regional involvement from unexpected players like Qatar, the intricate and ruthless dance of information control, and the chilling possibilities of escalation if a desperate regime feels cornered. What's truly fascinating here is how intertwined military action, political signaling, and media narratives truly are, making it incredibly difficult to ascertain the full truth from afar.
You've hit the nail on the head. This isn't just about rockets and airstrikes. It's about what's being shown, what's being hidden, and the incredibly high stakes of miscalculation in an information-rich but, well, truth-poor environment. This raises an important question for all of us, doesn't it? How much of what we consume daily about global conflicts is the true, unfiltered picture versus a carefully constructed narrative designed to achieve specific strategic goals? Think about how much you rely on information that might be intentionally filtered or suppressed. And on that note, we encourage you to stay curious, keep those questions coming, and always look for the deeper story behind the headlines.
Until next time, keep digging into the details and remember to subscribe to the Deep Research Podcast for more deep dives into the knowledge you need.